Gotham have won their second NWSL championship in 3 years, proving that sometimes the best way to get what you want is just to perfect what gets you through the single elimination format, and they did it in style. Welcome, everybody, to this week's edition of The Lace Up. I am your host, Claire Watkins. It is Monday, November 24th. We've got a lot to talk about. We're going to be getting in depth on the befores, during, and afters of NWSL Championship weekend, where Gotham defeated Washington to take the trophy home. And then we're going to hit some quick notes on this week's US Women's National Team roster for their final two friendlies against Italy. No rest for anybody. I hope everyone is having a blast because it is soccer city right now until it gets a little bit quiet in the end of December. So lots to jump into. No further ado, let's dig in. So I am back in Chicago after another wild NWSL championship weekend, which feels a little bit more like a week these days. You probably hear it in my voice. Another great success in San Jose. You know, they had the awards show, there's media day, you have pre and post championship parties. The league keeps growing at these neutral site venues every year. It feels more and more like a summit of the industry, which is very cool. I mean, I think this is getting discussed more when you see crossover from women's sports leagues or just sports leagues in general, where it's very helpful to have sort of these apex points for an entire league industry. As we know with WNBA, that is an all-star game thing as opposed to a championship game thing. We always refer to, like the Super Bowl maybe being the best example of that, where everyone knows where they're going. Media can invest, other industry stakeholders can invest in getting everybody there, a meeting of the minds. I said it was like Wednesday to Sunday this year. I bet, give it 3 years, we'll be there for a whole week. It was really nice. And I say this every year, and I want to give a quick shout out here just right from the very beginning. I always walk away from this weekend very proud of my coworkers. If you were there in San Jose on the ground, if you were watching from home, if you interacted with any piece of Just Women's Sports content and you enjoyed it, it's because my coworkers pull off miracles every single year. It's always a blast. It's a lot of hard work with a huge payoff at the end. Really nice weekend. It's turning into something good. It's growing rapidly. I go back, I've been doing this for a minute. I've been to a lot of these. And there is a very distinct feeling maybe from like 2022 through now, which was not that long ago, that things are starting to really click into place with this feeling like a prestigious thing within the larger sports landscape outside of the soccer game itself, because the soccer game has always been obviously the biggest, most important, prestigious thing happening. And we're going to talk about it. There was a soccer game. Sometimes I get a little bit jaded with these where I go, I don't know, do people care about what happened in a championship game? Maybe I do. What's really important is who won. And Gotham won their second title, their second in 3 years even, 1-0 against the Washington Spirit with a goal by finals MVP Rose Lavelle, proving the doubters wrong, me a little bit, to be honest. Self-assured performance that underlined just how experienced this team is in big moments. The title also gives them the first ever North American double after the Bats won the CONCACAF W Champions Cup back in May, an achievement that I think both informed some of their well-known struggles in the regular season, but also I think gave them the blueprint for this championship. They came into this postseason very experienced, having played a lot of matches, high stakes matches in a tournament format. And Gotham this year has been tough to figure out. I think I've, talked about them a lot. There's some praise, some criticism. I think even going into this match, they would be the first people to say that they did not always showcase their identity, especially late in the regular season. I was very impressed by their ability to use that feeling as a focusing agent as opposed to something that could turn negative. But I also think you get a little bit of clarity. Like I said, you spend multiple days before a championship game getting to see how each team interacts with each other, talking to them, doing media day stuff, awards day stuff, press conferences, pre and post. You get a sense of what this team feels like here at the finish line. And like I said, I've been to a few of these now, and after a while, you start to pick up on some stuff and pick up on some patterns. On media day, for example, Washington came through first, and they came to speak through the media first, and they were awesome. You could see immediately how much they enjoy each other's company, cracking jokes, having fun, sitting at the tables together, speaking about each other, having a lot of really good, interesting things to say about the year that they've had. They're increasingly used to very eager media coverage. I mean, the Spirit really are in many ways media darlings. They're really fun to talk to. They play confident football. They've got big personalities. And even from last year to this year, you could tell that they were more comfortable with that. They were enjoying it, brimming with a lot of confidence after dismantling Portland last week. Really good energy. Gotham comes in a little bit after. And while they're also clearly very much enjoying each other's company, very comfortable around each other, good at the media insanity going on, there was something slightly more muted or focused maybe about their demeanor. It was a little calmer, maybe like even a little bit more like perfunctory, like, yes, we are here to do media day and then we're going to leave and do whatever. Like it was a little bit more pragmatic, business-like for as lovely as they were. And I spoke to both Rose Lavelle and Emily Sonnet that day for a piece that I wrote for the Just Women's Sports website. And I was struck by just talking to some of the leaders on the team, those two in particular, and just going like, yeah, these guys are vets now. Sonnet was playing in her 5th NWSL championship this week. That's a lot of championship games. And I remember covering those earlier championship games for her, even like a media day, for example. I remember talking to her media day 2018. And for as outgoing as she is, and people know how gregarious she is to fans, and you see it with her teammates, sometimes in media environments, it got much smaller, a little bit more softer spoken, a little bit less, not less confident, but just a little bit less sort of forthcoming and comfortable in those situations. I think people kind of know that dynamic with Sonnet and Lavelle. And this week, they were so good and just ready to chat. And you could just tell that this all just felt so comfortable, like truly just another game. And historically, there is something to the team that's a little bit quieter, a little bit more just like focused, maybe even bored in a media day. And I remember turning to a colleague that day and going like, oh, so Gotham's going to win. And I think that, maybe it's just self-fulfilling because what we saw in the game, but I do think that happens more often than not in NWSL championships. There are a lot of narratives coming in, and sometimes we know the team with the most momentum rolls over. But there are these data points throughout the history of NWSL championship games where it's not the team with the larger story going. It's the team that I think is just there to play a soccer game. And if there was anything, for example, hanging over Washington, I don't think, I could be wrong, but this is my take on it. I don't think it was Trinity Rodman's upcoming contract decision that was hanging over the Spirit at all. I mean, that was obviously a very pressing topic for like Commissioner Jessica Berman throughout the week and other stakeholders. And that question existentially has reached the league level. I don't think, though, that was necessarily hanging over the Spirit right now, because I do think that is still in flux. What I do think was hanging over them in terms of Rodman, who did have to handle a lot of media obligations this week, is she's just not 100%. She's nowhere near 100%. And I think there's a feeling that to be in that position for a second straight year, because despite starting last year, she was not 100% then either. She was in a lot of pain. I think it must be very weird or stressful to be asked a lot of questions about your future, being one of the huge superstars of this match, and just knowing that your impact on the game is going to have a hard limit because of what your body is going to allow you to do. And I think that if there's any kind of like tiring or like exhaustion on perhaps Rodman's part, or a deficit on the Spirit side by not having her, it's not because of what happens next. It's just about the year that she's had, first with her back and then her knee. And then we all saw at the end of this game just that nasty reminder that the back thing is still lurking for her. That's the stuff that can really impact a player's performance. And the motion I think everyone saw after the game felt as much just like, again, just true existential exhaustion and frustration that she can't be herself on the pitch without being in pain. And I'm sure that's tiring in the present and scary for the future, especially when she has a very big decision coming up in what she's going to do in her off season. And so I think that if we're talking about two separate things, one being a championship game and the other being the state of the NWSL, I think that Rodman's injury history this year had a much greater impact on the game than some of the larger questions that we've been asking about the league itself. And so that's all of the before. That's kind of setting the scene. I really like, you get to feel a little bit more embedded in these things when you're on the ground. And again, maybe self-fulfilling prophecies, but there were some signs that this was going to be close. despite the fact that if you were kind of looking at the two teams on paper and how they'd been playing, it felt like Washington should have been able to come in and rule. So what happened in the game itself? Two things, in my opinion. I'm kind of differentiating it in like two separate things in my brain. There's what Gotham did to impact the game, to put themselves in a position to win. And then there's just what happened. And sometimes in a single game final elimination, there are things that teams do, and then there is just simply what happened within the course of one 90-minute soccer game. But let's start about what Gotham did, because Gotham earned this 100% the same way that they earned the win in Kansas City, earned the win against Orlando, and they did it by playing clinical elite defense. Sonnet, probably the best player on the pitch, as was true in their quarterfinal against Kansas City. I think if this game had ended 0-0, for example, we're like up in the press box trying to write down final MVP, and we're looking at a game with like very, very few scoring chances and trying to figure out like who had the advantage. It probably would have been Sonnet, I think, as final MVP, if that was what we had to do at final whistle at the scoreless draw. Gotham held Washington without a shot on goal, which is wild. And it's not even the first time they've done that this season. And beyond that, they were denying service to keep the Spirits playmakers just off the ball entirely. It felt like Washington was chasing this game and could just not string the passes together, could not get the ball to the feet of their really exciting attacking playmakers. Kouassi and Monday just did not have, it wasn't because of them, it was because of the way Gotham was disrupting the way they were getting the ball. Sonnet said post-game that part of her role there at center back comes in organizing the midfield in front of her. Gotham wanted to play very compact through the middle spaces to, again, avoid that service, to try to knock out those passing lanes, really limit Corey Bethune's impact in the midfield. And that organization and the way they were way to communicate, where if you look at kind of that spine between Anne-Catherine Berger, Emily Sonnet, Jalen Howell, all the way up to their forwards, that was working. It was just working 100% of the time. And we haven't always seen it work this season. But again, you go 1, 2, 3, Kansas City, Orlando, and then against Washington and San Jose. That has been working for them. And I don't know, again, if it's experience, if it's just good footballing minds, if it's just gamer mentality, but that's what put them in the position to win this game. As predicted, I said this last week, Gotham did have to live dangerously at times on the wings. Lily Real had to be substituted at outside back in the second half by Bruninia after picking up a yellow card. Like the final act of the first half was Lily Real getting a yellow card. We thought, oh, is that foreshadowing to something different happening in the second half than what ultimately did happen? But no, they walked the tightrope. They were able to get it done. Real has a couple more close calls. It seems like maybe she's in danger of getting that second yellow. Juan Carlos Armoros makes the substitution, so they get away with that. They get a good, series of time out of Real, like 60 minutes or something like that. They bring a fresh Bruninia on. She's the one who ultimately sends in the cross that turns into Lavelle's game-winning goal. That all worked out, and it worked out perfectly for Gotham, where they knew they probably were going to have to make that change. And I think we saw that. That's why you maybe see Bruninia on the bench. They go, okay, when we might have an outside back into hot water here, we need to feel like we're going strength for strength when we have to make that change. And that's a difference from what happened in this game last year, the semifinal against Gotham and Washington last year, where they did ultimately get bit and have to suffer a red card on the wings. And so all of that, as we near, I think it was like the 71st, 72nd minute, is what puts Gotham in the position to win this game. And that's what they did. And then here's what happened. Hal Hirschfeld sprained her ankle. That's what happened. That is the ultimate game state. You're in this game state of super fine margins by Gotham's design. And then Spirit midfielder Hal Hirschfeld, unfortunately, sprains her ankle after she'd been having an incredible game in the defensive midfield with Emma Hayes in attendance, watching her play really, really well. She sprains her ankle. She wants to continue. She gets pulled off the pitch. She's getting extended treatment. At one point, her shoe is off and they're wrapping her ankle, and the team is playing with 10, and they play with 10 for over 5 minutes of game time. And it's just enough for them they're starting to boot the ball forward. They can't try to hold the ball as much. It's not totally shifting the tide. A lot of Gotham players actually said they didn't really notice or communicate that Washington was playing with 10, but you could just tell that they were like having trouble getting on the ball after working their way into that second half a little bit more. Hirschfeld ultimately does finally come back on. It's very clear that she cannot continue. And that's when the goal happens. Bruninia's cross to Lavelle, well placed, good cross, good goal, but actually Hirschfeld was maybe the player most well positioned to try to intercept that cross, and her step was gone, completely gone. And so I think at that point, you're sitting up in the press box. It's very easy to criticize what happened, right? Manager Adrian Gonzalez needed to have Deb Abayadun ready to sub on immediately. She was the natural person to put out there to go on for Hirschfeld. She was ready to go. She was getting warmed up. They wanted Hirschfeld to continue. She had been amazing. She wanted to continue. They basically went from first stress and strength test to second stress and strength test to maybe like third stress and strength test when they should have pulled her after the first one. If she couldn't go after the first one, you say, we don't have time. We have to be proactive. We cannot be reactive. And again, easy to say that now. It's just bad luck, though. The sprained ankle, the decisions made. I'm sure Gonzalez was sick about it after the game was over, feeling like maybe they lost the opportunity to mitigate what had just happened. But that's an NWSL championship for you. That sometimes is what it is in a single game elimination match. You have a team that puts themselves in the position and then something happens to get them the breakthrough. So the Spirit fall just short for a second straight year. And I think it's a tough one. It's a tough loss. I always am interested in what happens to the team that loses the NWSL championship. Maybe it's my background in Chicago that leads me to that. I've covered a few of those losses, and they're jettisoned into an offseason of uncertainty. Nobody knows what Rodman's doing next. I'm not sure Rodman knows exactly what she's doing next. And I think that there are salary cap considerations for Washington even beyond Rodman, which is that we've talked about this, I think, this year, where they've put together an incredible group of players. And you just wonder over time how they're going to continue to be able to pay them to stay. And you just hope for them to get healthy. It's all these different things, right? I mean, Washington's been weakened by injury. It's not fair. But that's, part of sports too. And just, again, like I think I said up top and just sort of elaborating on the Bats, man, they're gamers, they're experienced, they show up, they do their job. They understand what it takes to win. They won a whole lot in tournament formatting this year. I think if you are a football purist, you can probably express some frustration that Gotham played to win the postseason this year. That's very true. But also, how else do you do the double? I think that has to be the counterpoint, which is that you say, yes, they underachieved perhaps in the regular season, and at some point probably were no longer playing to win. I mean, who was playing to win the league after Kansas City ran away with it, right? But how else do you do it? How else do you manage the uptick in the game load? How do you manage the rotations? How do you manage the mental fatigue and figuring out your best positions than not to do this? They played to win the championship, and they did it. And they looked really, really good through 3 games. And I guess my final stamp on it, this is a glass half full. If you have a year where there is clearly one best team in the NWSL, and that is the Kansas City, then how fitting is that it was the best playoff team that won the championship, rather than if the Current couldn't do the double, if they couldn't go all the way. How nice was it that we have 2 very distinct trophy winners this year? There's the best team over the course of the season. It was not close. And then there's the team that has honed this format to the best of their ability. We've seen it. This is not unusual. We see this in the men's game all the time. There's Champions League winners that do just this. They figure out the ways to put themselves in the position to win. They keep calm heads and they get it done. So congratulations to Gotham. 2 out of 3 ain't bad. And I cannot wait to see what we see next year. Which leads us to our next order of the week. We're not done. We are not ready to close up for the holidays just yet. The U.S. Women's National Team is back. They're playing 2 more games here in the upcoming week to close out their 2025. No rest for anyone. Hayes, like I said, was at the game. She was at the NWSL Championship game prior to, I think, everyone making it down to Florida for the last 2 games of the year against Italy. And we got the roster late last week prior to NWSL festivities really kicking off. Thank you so much for that. U.S. soccer, when it rains, it pours. So we're just going to hit some quick notes on the roster, and we will do more in-depth coverage of those games once they are played. But it's an interesting squad, as always. I mean, the Hayes era, just always really interesting rosters. It doesn't still feel like they're 100% set on anything at all. I don't know if it's informed by availability or if it's informed by the fact that they didn't look, the kind of qualified A team didn't look that good against Portugal in the last window. I'm so curious what some of the thinking there is. Like, is it reactive? Is it proactive? Is it just they're still a year out from World Cup qualifying, so they're just going to try to empty the tank and see what they've got? But I've just got some player notes here in my initial thoughts, and then, like I said, we'll talk more about how everyone plays together next week. No Fallon Tillis-Joyce due to the poor Tillis Joyce, a fractured eye socket about over a week ago with Manchester United. So she will not be in this camp. Rest up well. I'm expecting a lot of Claudia Dickey minutes this week. Maybe we'll get like a Mandy McGlynn, but I don't know. I think this could be a 2 for 2 for Claudia Dickey. I think she's the clear number 2. And these are the kinds of things where we've seen this happen before with the goalkeeper camp. I'm not saying that this is going to happen, but this is actually a huge opportunity for Dickey. If you have reasons why someone who is maybe a little bit ahead of you in the depth chart is out for whatever reason, this is your time to shine. Show them what you got over 2 games and make them really think about who they want kind of between the sticks in these big games. Naomi Girma is back from her lower leg injury, thank goodness. And it sounds like from Hayes, she was very eager to get back into camp, which I don't blame her. And that sounds very much like her. And the team is so much better with her. And it'll be really nice to see her with some of these less experienced defenders. I think without Girma, they don't really have like their core nucleus of what they're doing. So I'm excited to see how they react to having her back. Lily Reel and Avery Patterson are getting more time in the outside back pool. It does seem like Hayes is getting more into a groove with that talent evaluation, bumps in the road and all. That makes sense to me. I think outside back is a position where you do at some point just have to commit to what you have and just see if you can continue to help those players improve to be ready for those big, like high transition, big physical games. We saw a big return for Croy Bethune, who, as we know, is the best of the best when she's feeling healthy and confident. Great time for her to be back in the camp environment. She's been very good throughout the second half of the season, through the postseason, despite the disappointment this last weekend. We're very happy to see Bethune back, and I would like to think that if she stays healthy, she is going to be in serious consideration for this team. And a return to the fold for Gotham defensive midfielder Jalen Howell, her first call-up in over 3 years. Can we get Sam Coffey some backup, is what I say. I like it. This is nice. Howell was in the mix for the U.S. coming out of college. She's got a more defensive style that isn't really represented in the player pool right now. Like we talked about this with the midfield, right? In the last camp, where they don't have kind of those midfield bruisers or the idea of a more physical presence, a disruptive off-ball presence that Howell brings. They try to mitigate that with sort of smaller, perhaps a little slower players who are more good on the ball. I like the idea of being like, okay, we tried that, saw some good things, saw some not so good things. See what someone like Howell can do. I think her playing with a more distributive number 8 like Johannes could present something really interesting where you have a really clear delineation of roles. I don't know. I go back and forth on this. Like, we want the evolution of the U.S. Women's National Team midfield. We want them to be on ball. We want them to be that more methodical, connective presence. But I also think sometimes they're really missing the physicality there. How do you get the best of both worlds? And I think Howell has a really good opportunity. It is a really good example of a player that you maybe want on your side. Like I said, that's the player that you want standing behind you when you're on the ball and you got someone running at you. That's who you want cleaning up your messes, is Jalen Howell. So I'm really curious to see how that plays out. And then perhaps the surprise call-up of the camp, Chicago Stars forward Jamise Joseph. She has done really well with the U23s this year. This is a really worthy call-up. I understand it. She's very active when she's not on the ball. She can stretch defenses. She's getting more and more confident with the ball at her feet in front of goal. And she's done a lot with a little in Chicago this year. Like, there's no getting around that. And I think that when you see a player who is as industrious as that, to be able to have as good as a season as she's having with a team that struggled as much as Chicago did, I think you want to see her in an environment where she's got more pieces around her. And I also just think she's got a great demeanor for professional football. She's very quiet, very calm, very put together. I like this call-up. I hope she crushes it. I hope she gets some time. Players we're not seeing: no Corbin Schrader entirely for another camp, something to monitor there. Ali Sentner, Ava Gaetino, and Giselle Thompson are going to be spending some time with the U23s, which, as we know, Hayes is very adamant, like, this is not supposed to be a demotion necessarily, but we're going to see some players cycle in and out. Shaw, senior team; Moultrie, senior team; other Giselle, younger Thompson, and Gaetino back with the U23s. And like I said above, this feels not like the final group, but we also saw the team, like I said, that Hayes considered to be perhaps A1 get beat by Portugal last month. So maybe she's ruminating more on what combos she's looking for. And there's a healthy dose of rewards for top performing NWSL players, which I think also makes a lot of sense. As their calendar year ends, they're about to go on a nice break. Give them this reward, see what they can do completely played in. Italy's a very good test, as we saw they did very well at the Euros this summer. And just a couple more games before the year in American soccer is done. And then we take a very brief break before jumping right back into it in January. The Late Sub is part of the Just Women Sports Network. This show is written by Claire Watkins and produced and edited by Parker Fenton. To get more of your favorite women's sports content, subscribe to the Just Women Sports newsletter and follow Just Women Sports across all your favorite channels.